Welcome back to Buddha Bites. I am Iris Fairfax, and I cannot believe that we have gotten to episode 20. And we are also in comfort food season, and to me, nothing says comfort food quite like Bolognese. If you are a product of my generation or thereabouts, you might have grown up with jarred tomato sauce on spaghetti that was quite unsatisfying. A lot of times it was too acidic or too sweet or not enough meat. Well, finally, when I was in elementary school, I discovered my first meat sauce that I adored. And since then, I have tried to come as close to the traditional Bolognese as I possibly can, but also keep my little twists on things here and there. So let's go into the kitchen and do Bolognese. So like most or many savory foods, we're going to begin with what's known as a mirepoix. You and I have discussed this before. That is onion, celery, and carrot. Now what I did this time is that I processed it in the food processor because it breaks it down to such a degree that it doesn't take as long to cook, and it means that the flavors develop a lot more quickly. We're going to start with a little bit of olive oil in the bottom of the Dutch oven, just enough to cover the bottom. And you might be able to see that it's glistening nicely because I started it before we started filming, so it heated up. So we are going to put our mirepoix directly in the olive oil. Now, I'll probably include somewhere in the description the word mirepoix, how it's spelled and all of that. But for right now, onion, celery, and carrot. How much? I used a large onion. Now, small, medium, large. That you'll always see recipes say use a small onion, use a medium onion, use a large onion. It's all relative. So what I did this time is I chose the size of onion that I thought was appropriate for the amount of meat that I'm using, and then I matched it with approximating as much celery and carrot. So I started out with the onion. You really can't go wrong with this because this is all flavor building. I can never think of a time when I can say that I've done this sauce and it's been too much onion, celery, and carrot. I don't think that exists. I will be adding garlic later. I'm not adding it now because, I'll turn this up a little bit, because garlic tends to burn early. So I didn't want to mix it up with, I didn't want to process it with the other mirepoix. So I'm going to put it in with the meat a little bit later. I'm going to sweat this a little bit. It really is, as I said before, this is a very forgiving, not even so much a recipe as sort of a general guide. So you're seeing that it is coming to a little bit of a simmer. I just want to get a little bit of heat on it to start out. So we'll leave that be for just a moment. And I'm going to tell you about some of the other ingredients that are going to go in. So I'm going to jump ahead a tiny little bit. The recipe is eventually going to call for tomato product. Now I have a tomato puree and also crushed tomatoes. And for me, they're sort of interchangeable. If you can't get one and you can get another, that's fine. It really doesn't matter because this is going to be cooking down for so long that it's just a matter of how much water is going to eventually come out of the sauce. But I will tell you there's a definite difference. This is a tomato puree. It almost looks like, I would say like a tomato paste with a little bit of water and mixed really well. So that is tomato puree. And that was how I first learned that this was what I was told to use when I was first taught. This is crushed tomatoes. You see it's a little more watery. And I'll just put them one right next to the other. I'm going to do one of each today because I just thought, what the heck? But, and that contrasts with tomato paste. I took this out of a 6-ounce can. I also really like tomato paste that comes in this tube here, which I've shown you before. I love this because I find that it's neater to work with. But in this case, I wanted to get as much flavor in as possible, and this was a 6-ounce can, and this is a 4-ounce tube. So for our purposes today, I'm just going to do the 6-ounce can. I uncanned it to save a little bit of time. So now that I've killed a little bit of time, we have sweated the mirepoix. And already, because I had processed it, one could smell it really well. But even now that it's cooked a little bit, you can smell it even better. This is the point where the true Bolognese technique comes into play. So I'm going to use some wine. It doesn't really matter what type of wine it is, so long as it's something that you're willing to drink. And we're going to do equal amounts of wine and milk, but we're not going to put them in at the same time. I love these measuring cups where you don't have to lean down to measure. So 1 cup. You know what? I'm actually going to do the meat first. This is an 80% ground beef that is 80% lean, 20% fat. You can also do the meatball mix or the meatloaf mix of ground beef, pork, and veal. I would have done that today. The only reason why I didn't was that I couldn't really find it in the store. What you don't want to do is to go too lean with the beef. You need fat for this dish. So I am going to put in a pound of ground beef. Now, sometimes I do more. A lot of times I do more. The basic recipe is for a pound. But this was very neatly available in pound packages. Now, some people like to break up, and I'm using my non-dominant hand. People like to break up the meat like this. It takes a little while. Can I show you a teeny tiny shortcut? Potato masher. Just use a potato masher. You already have it on hand. You see how quickly this goes? And it's all meshed up. And this is ready to go into the sink. So we'll stir it a little bit more. And we're going to stir this until it browns a little bit. I am not big on browning it all the way through, because it's just my opinion that when the meat is a little bit undercooked, it takes in flavor a little bit better. So I'm just going to let it brown a tiny little bit before I put in that wine. That gives me time to tell you, you see it's already beginning to brown pretty decently. But that gives me a little bit of time to tell you the story of the first meat sauce that I fell in love with. So, my best friend, or our best friend, Leon, lived just a block or two away from us. We used to play together. We played across the street. We had a bank across the street, and that was our playground. And after our chores were done, we would play across the street, or we would do music either at our house, which had a piano, or at Leon's house, which also had a piano. His mother, Lula May, was the one who gave me my first meat sauce recipe. It was some Saturday, and she was cooking, and she let us taste some of this meat sauce, and I was instantly in love. Even in elementary school, I'm begging her for this recipe, which she had me write out, and that was the first one I tried. But let me tell you, while this is still browning, the way that I would see her making sauce on a Saturday. Lula Mae Evans was sort of an industrious type, and she did hair at home. And so in the kitchen, now again, folks of my generation know about these kitchen chairs that were almost like a chair and a step stool at the same time. So she had her clients, and there's one in particular that I'm thinking of, and she's still around, God bless her. She would have her clients sit in the chair, which was positioned between the stove and the entrance to her shed. And Lula Mae had those like hot combs, the old-fashioned hot comb that you heat on the stove. And so she would stir the sauce. And one thing that she told me was, don't step away from your sauce. It's easier to clean up around you. It's easier to catch when it might potentially be at the tipping point of burning. Don't leave your sauce at a certain point. So sure enough, true to form, she would be doing her client's hair with the hot comb on one burner, and she would be stirring sauce on the other burner. And the burner that had the hot sauce on, that had the hot comb on it, she would also use to light her cigarette. So that is my loving memory. Lula Mae is no longer with us, and this video I'm sharing with you is partly in memory of Lula Mae. She was such a character, and she was the first person to introduce me to the right kind of meat sauce. So now, you see where this is right now? It's not cooked through, but it is a little bit more browned. This is the point where I want to add this white wine, and it is a cup. There's not too much that I would measure. The wine and the milk I do measure. We are going to let that cook down a little bit. There are some traditional Bolognese recipes that say let it cook all the way down. But I've never, in all the times that I've done a Bolognese this way, known the wine and the milk to cook all the way down. So what I do is I cook it until the alcohol smell becomes a little less pronounced. So this is a pretty wet product right now, and it's beginning to bubble up on the edges. So I'm just going to keep stirring. And in just a little bit, we are going to add an equal amount of milk. I know that this sounds strange to put milk in a meat sauce. And certainly if you're kosher, that's not something that you can do. But I'm going to prepare 1 cup of milk so that after the wine boils down a little bit, and you see this is not going to get dry. That's not the point of it. So that when this cooks, the alcohol smell comes out a little bit, that's when you add the milk. You don't want to do them at the same time. This is not the kind of recipe that you want to rush. That's why Lula Mae had the cigarette and the client. So this is, in the Italian tradition of almost like, what do they call it, a Sunday sauce. You plan on being in the kitchen for a little while, So in the interest of developing the flavors, you do not add those two liquids at the same time. You let this do its thing, and then you come back in, and let's see. I'm satisfied with the aroma of the alcohol having burned off a little bit. Now we're going to go in with the milk. So this is the point where we let the milk come down a little bit as we did with the wine. You see how, by definition, how milky it looks right now? Well, we're going to leave it be for a little bit. But we're not going to be idle here. I'd like to show you how to make your own pasta. So I'm going to go over close enough to check on this from time to time, but I'm going to go over to my marble and show you how to make your own pasta. All right, making pasta is not as difficult as you may think. Let's start out with 1.5 cups of semolina flour. Semolina is a durum wheat flour. It has a very high gluten content as opposed to, say, cake flour or all-purpose flour. And so as a result of that, it keeps its shape really well during cooking. It's a great flour to use. It almost reminds me of polenta or cornmeal, but it's finer than that. Let me show you. You see? Very much like cornmeal, very finely milled cornmeal. So you don't have to use semolina, but I like it because it's classic. And this is not too terribly expensive in the stores. One bag will do at least 2 batches of pasta. And you just have to follow the instructions on the back. You don't have to remember them because I'm about to tell you what they are. So, 1.5 cups of durum wheat semolina flour with 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I like to mix it together in the bowl first. And then turn it out onto my marble, which has nothing on it. It is a totally clean slab of marble. I make a well in the middle that I believe will hold the rest of the wet ingredients that are going to go in. Okay, so basically you have a semolina donut. Now I'm going to stop here, jump back over to the sauce, which is bubbling nicely. Now is the time for this, hold that thought, multitasking in the kitchen, to add the tomato product into the sauce. Now, I'm wearing the chef's coat because red sauce tends to splatter, but one way that you can reduce some of the splatter is to take your spoon and pour your sauce over the spoon. Now you have no more splatter. Okay? Now I'm going to put a little bit of water in here as time goes on, because I don't want to lose any of the flavor in there. So that's 1 can, which is 29 ounces. And then I'm going to do the crushed tomatoes. You see the different consistency? Has a little bit more chunk to it. Now this is looking more like sauce. Okay? So, if all you can find is canned plum tomatoes, that is fine. You just end up having to go into the can and either mash up the plum tomatoes with your hands, which can be fun, or, he laughed, I got him, or you would have to take kitchen shears and cut into the can, which is a little inconvenient. I tend not to do it. You don't want to use fresh tomatoes for this. Tomatoes, in this case, do better canned. That's one of the wonderful things about making a meat sauce. And here is our tomato paste that we're going to put in. We're going to let that cook down a little bit. That is one of the beauties of this recipe, is that it's essentially an open a can and dump it in situation. So while this cooks down a little bit, I am going to add a tiny bit of water to these cans. Don't worry about it diluting the sauce, because this sauce is going to cook down for hours, ideally. So I just rock it back and forth a little bit. A little bit of moisture buys you time in the simmering process. And it doesn't really so much add to the volume because, as I said, it's going to cook down. So we are going to leave this be, let it come to a simmer, and then we'll add some more seasonings. In the meantime, let's go back over to our semolina well. I'm going to take the same bowl. Oh, you know what? I need some eggs.
How many?
I need 2 eggs. That's the beauty of having your family with you. So I have equal parts of just plain old water and olive oil. So it's 2 tablespoons each of tap water and olive oil. Those are going to go in the bowl, and that goes bye-bye. And you add 2 eggs to it. When I went out to buy eggs yesterday, I found, you know, I'm just like the egg freak around here. I know you're tired of hearing about eggs, but they're so central to just about everything that I cook. And I love a good egg, as you know. But when I went out to get eggs yesterday, as we all should do, I just going to combine this a little bit. Love the color, love the color. I opened up the cartons to make sure that there weren't any broken eggs. And I actually found an egg that had a little bit of feather on it, which I thought was cool. Maybe some people might think that's nasty, but I made sure that as I switched out the broken ones with intact ones, I included the one with the feather. Because it just reminds me that our food comes from somewhere. And part of having a good relationship with food is respecting where it comes from. So this mixture goes inside the semolina well. Remember, that was semolina with a half a teaspoon of salt. Now I'm going to try little by little to take this well and incorporate the semolina into the center of the well. The goal is to not break the wall. So I'm going to start out with this fork and just sort of scramble and combine them together. And then eventually I'm going to move from the fork to a bench knife. And I think I have shown you the bench knife before, but little by little we bring it in. Now, if you happen to break the well, it's not tragic. You just put your hand in and try to contain the wet as best you can as you're bringing it all together. I already did one of these this morning, so I kind of know what this is going to do. You want to do it this way rather than to try to combine everything all at once, because your kitchen might be more or less humid on any given day. If I were to try to do this in the summertime, I might need a little less semolina. I might need a little bit more, depending on the humidity level. So pulling it in like this is important for ensuring that you don't use too much flour or too little. Now, if my kitchen behaved as it did when I did this earlier in the day, you see how now this is holding up on its own. So I can switch over to my bench knife and then pull in some of the flour. I love the bench knife because in cooking it's good to have one dry hand and one wet hand. And this helps me to still have a business hand that stays as dry as possible. I don't like when people say dirty and wet, because food is not dirty. I generally say wet and dry, or business and non-business. You see how this is pulling together? I'm still leaving a little bit of flour out just in case I don't need it. I think I will need it. Pardon the pun. And then when all of this comes together, then I will literally knead, K-N-E-A-D, this into a ball and wrap it in plastic. You feel that the beauty of kneading is, as opposed to trying to do this sort of thing in the food processor, is that you have greater control because you feel what you're doing. I really am a big proponent, as you probably have guessed, of getting my hands in the food as much as possible. You see how this is now coming together nicely? For now, it looks like I might be able to get rid of the bench knife for now, or at least set it aside, and show you the proper kneading technique. With semolina, this is such a tough flour that it can take a lot of kneading. This is the process. This is the proper way to knead. You take the heel of your hand and you push out the dough, and then you pull it back on itself. Push it and then pull back. Now this is still a little on the wet side. It just needs to incorporate more of the semolina. I have a wet cloth underneath my marble so that it doesn't move quite so much. But ultimately, we want to knead this to the consistency of what they used to say, a baby's bottom. You know it when you feel it, and I've never had babies, but you kind of know. I might end up, I was going to say I might end up needing a little bit more flour, but I really don't think so. You see, this is coming up just fine. I have no more raw semolina on the bench, which this is called, and this will get kneaded for perhaps another 5 minutes or so, but I already have one that I made for you. So it's beginning to look a little bit more like a nice little dough ball. I still want it a little bit smoother. So you just continue to do that and pull it back on itself. See? To the point where, and I'm going to stop here because I have one that's already done, but this is pretty much what you want. You've just seen in real time the creation of pasta dough. So this already is looking ready to go. It is not quite, and I'll show you the difference between one that is ready to go and this one. So this one I made this morning, and it's been sitting for a few hours at room temperature. And that's what this looks like. So, new one that's ready to go. It's the science of cooking. It fascinates me every time. So I'm going to wrap this up again. We are going to roll this out in a moment, but it's time for us to get back to our sauce. And I had forgotten to put in my mom's favorite ingredient, the garlic. Now, this is something that you can leave out. Ordinarily, I would add it with the beef, but I just plain old forgot. No harm, no foul. This, again, is going to be cooking for a long time. How much garlic? Well, it's almost like what we said about the mirepoix. Lila Mae Evans' recipe called for 1 clove of garlic. And to any recipe that calls for just 1 clove of garlic, I have to say, no, always more than 1 clove of garlic. I know, Mom, I know, but you have tasted this sauce many, many times, and it's had a lot of garlic in it, and you have told me that you love it. So what I do is I just make sure, depending on how fresh the garlic is how much you really need to add. When you're shopping for garlic, you want it to be tight to itself. You want it to take a little bit of effort to break away. if you have some older garlic, like this is slightly older, you see that this even has a little bit of a dent in it. You don't necessarily have to throw it away. It's just that it's going to have a little less flavor, so you're going to want to add a little bit more. So I added some of the fresher garlic to some of the slightly older garlic, which is why you saw as much as you saw. I would do at least 3 or 4 cloves of garlic for a sauce of this size. And as I mentioned before, it's ideal to include it with the beef, not essential. This is nothing bad is going to happen. One thing that you will want to always include is a bay leaf. A bay leaf has that taste, that flavor profile called umami. It is a savory quality that is kind of difficult to define. Most bay leaves are not this big. I actually got this from a Mexican vendor, and they came really, really big. I'm going to use this one. I'll use this one, and I'll only use one. You want to make sure that it is intact and that it will not break up as you cook it. You want to stir very carefully. You don't want anybody ingesting the bay leaf. The bay leaf is going to do its job and then it's going to come out. But it's going to add something that's almost indescribable to this dish. It's an essential if you can have it. Fresh is great. I've never been able to get fresh bay leaves, but you know, one can wish. And this is where we add the classic Italian seasonings. So the classic ones are parsley, basil, oregano, and a little bit of thyme. I always put more parsley in than anything else. This would be about 1.5 tablespoons to start out. And you'll see the way that I like to do it. I like to pile them up in the pot so that I remember what all I already added. So this is the parsley. For the oregano, maybe about 2 teaspoons. Now the oregano is an aroma and taste that you will remember from that, what you add to a pizza that gives it a boost. This is dried basil. I'm going to put this about the same amount of basil as oregano. Those are the basic ones. So that is parsley, oregano, basil. To that I'm going to add thyme, but I will not add anywhere near as much thyme as the others. Thyme has a flavor that I would actually start with maybe about 1/2 teaspoon. More than that, and it almost gives the sauce a little bit of a soapy taste. So I'm very careful about the amount of thyme that I use. Now this is where I would add a little bit of pepperoncini, which are red pepper flakes. Go easy on these two, even though it is a lot of sauce. Go easy on it. You can always add more. You can't take it out. I also like to throw in a little bit more onion powder because you can't have enough of that. I might add more later. And this might surprise you. Nutmeg. If you can get fresh nutmeg, that's great. I have some, but I didn't want to bother with grating nutmeg, not today. So nutmeg is one of the aspects, one of the flavor profiles that makes this a bolognese, maybe about 1 teaspoon. And this is dry, so I feel comfortable adding a little bit more. So at this point, we are going to combine all of these. And this is where you sort of simmer. You can step away if you need to for a little bit. You're not chained to the pot. You're not chained to the stove at this point. And in fact, as long as you stay nearby, you can actually do something else, and we are about to do that. We are going to let these dry seasonings moisten up and meld with the sauce. And this is where we could actually go for hours like this. Mm-hmm. So we're gonna leave this be. This is on the lowest that it can be. And we're gonna go roll out pasta. So let's go over to the other side and do that. This is so much fun. I hope that when you see me do this, you're encouraged, like everything else, to try it yourself. Now, here's our dough ball. I'm going to just take a little bit of it and cut it with the bench knife. That's one of the reasons why it's called a knife. And I will take the remainder and keep it dry in the plastic wrap. And we are going to roll it through the pasta attachment on my KitchenAid. This is a new acquisition. I'm so happy for it. My sister's family, who I consider to be my family too, had some neighbors who were getting rid of some things, and I managed to get this, and it was never really even touched. I had a manual pasta roller, and I still have it, but where I am now, it's kind of difficult to sort of hand crank. So, actually, I'm going to shut this off for now and show you. What you do is this has numbers. This one goes, I think, from numbers 1 to 8, from thick to thin, with 1 being the thickest. So I'm going to start this at the number 1 setting and flatten this a little bit and run it through. And if it doesn't quite run through successfully, then I will just thin it out a little bit more. What the pasta roller does is it gradually thins the pasta to the desired consistency. You can't really thin it all effectively in one shot, which is why this is so wonderful. Now I'm going to run it through again at 1. Is this not fun? I have so much fun with this. So I'm satisfied with this at the number 1 setting. Now I'm going to change it. I'm going to tighten it to the number 2 setting. Go through again. You see, this is my foolhardiness. This is the first time I've used this attachment doing this video. So fools rush in. Now I'm going to get it a little bit thinner. And you see that it also gets longer in the process. You don't have to pull it, you just guide it. And I think we'll get it maybe one more thinner, if that makes sense. And then we'll be ready to cut this pasta. So this is where I'm running out of hands, but that's okay. So this is the thinnest I think I'm going to go. And you can also cut this in half, which I think I will. That's another value of this beautiful bench knife. Set this aside. And now you have these gorgeous sheets of pasta. Now, if you wanted to stop here, look at how thin this is. Now you can sort of see my finger through it. Now with this, you can make lasagna, which we will do someday. So I'm going to set this down gently. I'll take this one piece and run it through one more time. And now we have the sheets of pasta. Now what we could do with this is make what's known as pappardelle, which is a thick pasta which lends itself really, really well to the Bolognese. I think it's a great size of pasta, but this particular set does not come with a pappardelle attachment. So we take off this attachment and we will switch it out with the thickest attachment that I could find in the set of 3, which is the linguine attachment. Let's see, yeah, that would be the only way that it could go. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. And we take this piece and tighten it in. It's really, really easy. This keeps me from having to buy one of those motors that attaches to the manual ones. So now we are going to get our linguine, and we are that much closer to eating. So we turn it on again. And let's run this through. Is this going? Is this going? It's not going. Maybe I need to tighten this up a little bit. Maybe that's why. And if it doesn't, guess what? I'm making pappardelle. But it looks like this might be the solution. Let me just see. Yes, it's rolling. So let's give it one more go round. Am I feeding it through the right way? Guess what? We're about to make some pappardelle, y'all. Yep, not gonna worry about that. See, this is what happens when you take it live before you know what you're doing with a particular piece. But that's okay. That's what the kitchen is for, fooling around and figuring it out. So, we will take a ruler and a trusty knife. And I'm not going to put you through this whole process, but I'm going to show you this is how we will make pappardelle. You can use a pasta wheel, but I didn't plan on doing this, so I'm just going to show you a little bit with the knife. We will cut off the shaggy part. And I'm actually just going to cut this a little bit this way. And then we will make strips that are as uniform as we possibly can. I didn't do this on purpose just because I like pappardelle, but yeah, this is going with the flow. So a pappardelle noodle is about maybe about 3/4 of an inch thick. So I'm just going to make a few to show you. And the beauty of fresh pasta is that you can pop it right in the pasta water and it cooks in just a couple of minutes as opposed to, 20 minutes. Well, nothing cooks for 20 minutes. Like average pasta cooks at least 10 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes. We'll neaten this up a little bit. You have the perfect consistency from the pasta roller. And just to kind of give you an idea, I'll just cut this a little bit. Who cares? It's my kitchen. Now we have the perfect consistency of pappardelle to pop right into the water and then mix it with the sauce. So stay tuned. Alrighty, so this is the point where this is really looking like sauce. Most of the seasonings are in, and I'm going to salt and pepper to taste. I'm going to start out sort of with about a teaspoon of each, give or take. With all of the other seasonings, I really don't think that a lot of salt and pepper is needed. But this is where I will get it in there, and this is the time that we have all been waiting for, and I do mean all of us, at least all of us in this room. Time to drop the pasta into boiling water. So here is our pasta, and where did I put my salt? Oh, there it is. You want to put it in salted water. Don't worry about the amount. This is the only opportunity you get to season the pasta itself. You want it to be salty like salt water, although certainly you won't be tasting it. Now, I have cut out all of this pappardelle, the accidental on purpose pappardelle, and I put it on a pan with a little bit of semolina just to keep it a little bit loose. And I'm going to take a handful of this and put it in, maybe two, in the salted water to do its thing for a little bit. Now I'm going to break it up a little bit with my tongs. Yay. But at this point it's a little on the delicate side, so all you want to do is to move it around a little bit, not too much. Now I'm going to taste our sauce, which frankly I think it has hours to go, but I'm still going to taste it for seasonings now. And because it has the wine, the pepperoncini, yeah, it's really pretty good all by itself. It doesn't need sugar. I think sometimes people do need to add sugar. Instead, if I wanted to add sugar, I would add Parmesan cheese. Now this goes against many an Italian nonna's rules that you don't put cheese in your Bolognese, you use it as a finishing product. But this substitutes for me, it's a substitute for salt as well as sugar. Now,
We've lost mine.
we are about to serve this up, so let's take a quick break. I'm going to get my bowl, and we are going to get ready to sit down and eat. All right, it's the moment of truth. Let's look at this. This is not, in my opinion, not ready to go because this is ready to go. You see the difference? It's cooked down a little bit. This is the one that we're going to be eating now. I have taken the pappardelle out of the water. It's a nice consistency. I love it. And we are just going to, I put it in a bowl to mix everything up. I am going to take a ladle. Thank you. And I'm just going to dress this a little bit. I love lots of sauce, but I'm just going to stir it gently. What I'm doing is I'm keeping the tongs at the bottom of the bowl and just sort of shaking the pasta around it so that I don't break it up too much. And then we are going to move this to a serving bowl. Lovely, lovely. We're going to neaten this all up. And we're going to add a little bit of sauce to it because sauce, yummy. I'm going to clean it up a tad for presentation. Let's add just a little bit of Parmesan. Now see, I'm using the stuff that we all remember, but this would be a wonderful opportunity to use Parmigiano Reggiano. It's my favorite, but this is what I could grab. And let's finish it off with a little bit of fresh basil. And it's finally time to eat. Let's go. Well, I think we've earned this one. It's been a wild and woolly afternoon. So I am just going to dig in to this fantastic dish. I'm so excited about this. Look at how nice and thin the pappardelle is. Yummy. I'm saying yummy, I haven't even tasted it yet. And I was right. It's not overly seasoned. It's not too peppery. Not one single ingredient really overpowers the other. This is the way, in my opinion, a bolognese is supposed to go. Now, if you don't want to do pasta, the stuff on my face, I don't know, I don't care. You can do this over rice. You can do it over zucchini noodles. You can put zucchini in it. You can hide spinach in it so that your kids get the bolognese, but they also get the spinach in there. Strong to the finish, they eat the spinach. This is so versatile. You can make a lasagna with it, which I think we're going to do in the future. I just think you can freeze it. It freezes so well. in containers. I'm gonna have my family take some home. I love this. I'm not gonna try to stand on convention and recommend any sort of wine. I am simply drinking a little bit of what we cooked with, which was, I believe, a Pinot Grigio. So, try this at home. This is not a classic Bolognese. Nonna might not approve, but my belly does. So, this is Iris Fairfax from Buddha Bites. Try this at home. And do remember, you are the Buddha. See you next time.